When do you hear this story? So we've got anti-bullying laws in New Jersey signed by former Governor Chris Christie. Some are questioning whether or not these laws are working or are they making it worse. In one case, a Haddonfield middle schooler was allegedly bullied in 7th grade, but the high school bullying counselor and the principal said that the comments that were made to this young girl on Facebook and Twitter and other social media outlets did not constitute bullying. The family appealed that decision, and now 5 years later, they are finally getting a hearing.
From the moment New Jersey passed its anti-bullying law, I began warning that it's going to make things worse, and my predictions have been validated. The suicide rate among children has skyrocketed, especially in New Jersey. The tougher schools try to fight bullying, the worse it gets.
Let's bring back our A-plus panel for tonight's show. Alison Young, Republican strategist, and Bob Bianchi, former prosecutor and now defense attorney. Alison, I'm going to start with you on this. Does this show, I mean, as our expert talked about, that the bullying laws have just failed to do anything that they intended? As a matter of fact, in some cases, may have made it worse.
Well, if it's taking 5 years to get resolution for someone who is bullied, then you've absolutely failed because you've failed the child.
Kids pick on each other, and now they've said everything is under bullying. So how do kids work it out?
Yeah, well, I believe that we should be teaching our kids resiliency skills, but I disagree that the bullying law has not worked. It has worked substantially, even from standpoint of education, law enforcement, working with the education community. The reason this case is different is because it's off-campus taunting. First Amendment issues are associated with this because you have to be careful that we don't, trample on the First Amendment. So this particular case is kind of like in these weird crevices of the law. But from a prosecutor's point of view, when this law came forward, it did a lot to change the culture of bullying, and I think was good.
Alison, we're clearly failing to protect our kids. The suicide rates are spiking. You've got suicides now in middle school, and this protection is not working, at least in my opinion and according to the stats. So the question is, how do we teach our kids how to cope with this? And what happened to teaching your 12-year-old, 13-year-old, et cetera, how to block people on Facebook, on social media?
Yeah.
You block them, you don't engage.
Forget your 12 and 13-year-old, Bill. What about your 5 and 6-year-old? This is where we're failing. All of this, sexual harassment, bullying, why is it all a factor in middle school and high school? Because we haven't taught our kids when they're young to be decent human beings. We have lost the high ground here by not even teaching our kids how to interact with one another. Forget about teaching them how to fight. That'll come.
The parents' refusal to accept responsibility for their kid, and like Alison is saying, teaching them good, role models in terms of what their conduct should be towards others. What I found is that if we found a kid that did something wrong, we were trying to help them, they would be in your face. I actually had a guy in my face pointing his finger at me saying, "You're my servant." And I said, "No, I'm a public servant. My kid can't do any wrong. This is your problem or it's the teacher's problem." And I turned to him and said, "Sir, now I know exactly why your child's in trouble."
Comes from somewhere, right? All right, thank you guys. Gotta leave it there. All right, let's bring in our A-plus panel for tonight's show. I'm joined by Alison Young, Republican strategist. Good to see you, Alison.
Thanks, Bill.
Bob Bianchi back with us. He is a former prosecutor and now a defense attorney. Good to see you, Bob. Bob, I'll start with you. The separation of church and state does not mean what many people think it means. It's about the establishment of a state religion. It's not about prohibiting a public official from talking about Scripture.
Obviously, you go back to the Founding Fathers. In all of the originating documents, God was not taken out of the Constitution or Declaration of Independence or any other thing. And what I found interesting as a public official, Bill, is I'm a very devout Catholic, and I would have my Bible on my desk, and I wear a crucifix ring, and was told during an actual trial there was going to be an objection to me wearing that ring in front of the jury, and that somebody was going to tell me I had to take the Bible off of my desk. I said, I'm not establishing, I have a right to my own religious beliefs. I'm not trying to establish that. Great for him to bring God. I think faith-based people are wonderful people. But to actually use it as a sword to split parents from children, citing theologically inappropriate that you should always follow what the government says, well, he obviously didn't know that Jesus Christ was crucified because he defied the Roman authorities, that Paul himself was beheaded because he defied the Roman authorities, and that this government was created because we defied England.
By the Constitution, you are guaranteed the right to practice your religion. It's freedom of religion, not freedom from it. I think the question we should really split hairs about with the Attorney General is is he kind of historically accurate in using this? So if you look at when Romans 13 has also been used in political context, it was when defenders of slavery were trying to ward off abolitionists,
Absolutely.
like in the 1840s and 1850s. It was back in the American Revolution when loyalists were trying to keep people from the revolution. It's like it's historically inaccurate in this kind of context. And then one last point. Before Romans 13 comes Romans 12, which said, let love be the guide, not evil. So in using this to talk about separating children from families is
isn't
really...
that both of you a cop-out on both sides? And the point I'm making is no one ever objects when a child is separated from a parent when a parent goes to prison.
Yeah, but listen, this is
Do they?
this is the Attorney General weaponizing the Bible and the message of the Bible in my opinion, respectfully, an absurd and hateful way.
The real issue is that we're separating kids from their parents at the border. No one agrees that that's good policy. The real tragedy here is that Congress has failed to enact comprehensive immigration reform, and we shouldn't be coming down on the Attorney General for actually enforcing the laws
Alison,
that exist.
I say amen to that.
We may both agree. We'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. All right, let's bring in our A-plus panel for tonight. We're joined by Peter Brown, Democratic councilman in Linden, New Jersey. Peter, welcome back. Good to see you. Bob Bianchi is here, former county prosecutor and now defense attorney. Always good to see you, Bob. And Alison Young, Republican strategist. Great to see you, Alison.
Thanks,
Peter, I'm going to start with you. We have a video here that I think is somewhat out of context, and we actually called the attorney for the plaintiff and had a conversation with him. And even the attorney couldn't really define whether or not his client had tried to break through the barrier or not. So even the plaintiff in this is not defining what happened prior to the video starting. What do you say? Did the police use too much force? Is this a wrongful arrest case in your opinion?
In my opinion, we need more facts of the case. And let me put it this way. I absolutely agree. If someone feels like their civil rights have been violated, they should be able to file suit. However, on the other side, when you read this article, calling police officers the Blue Klux Klan is something totally wrong. And us saying that, the police department is racist and going after civil rights leaders is something that should not be tolerated. We need to stop this.
Bob, to you, as a former prosecutor, legally speaking, from your perspective and police procedure, the cops have a right to establish a barrier, even if, and we don't know if this Black Lives Matter protest had a permit or not. The attorney didn't know when I asked him that question. So, do they or do they not have a right to keep the peace and order in a city?
They do have the right to keep the peace and the order so long as it's reasonable, but I was uninspired by listening to the attorney because we don't even know how this conflict occurred. And just because he may have violated the law doesn't mean that the police are allowed to use excessive force in taking him down. And that video looks pretty bad, but we don't have all the facts yet. I don't know how we can even begin to make a determination.
Allison, to that point, looks pretty bad. Bob hit the nail on the head. Every arrest video we see looks pretty bad. Remember Wildwood?
Exactly.
That looked pretty bad. And then you fill in the 40 seconds before, and all of a sudden, the cops are doing their job.
It's absolutely right. So, what's the rush to justice, right? So we see only one part of the video. We're asking all these questions about what's the context, what happened before. That's what Peter's saying. It's what you're saying. It's what Bob's saying. We don't know. And so all we see is the kind of ugly video that looks like some brutality. Exactly, and the lawyer didn't know.
On that point, wouldn't you say, and I would say this, I mean, the NYPD has arguably been so tolerant of all the protests in New York City. After Charlottesville, they walked with Black Lives Matter down the roads, even though they had closed roadways and intersections. I don't hear about many activists being arrested at all in New York City.
Every once in a while, you hear about things going wrong. And to Bob's point, you have a process where internal affairs will step in and look into this. So let's go through the process before we jump through and say and file these lawsuits and start saying the whole NYPD is a racist run department.
Bob, last point, as an attorney, take off your prosecutor's hat, defense attorney. Does this lawsuit, do you think, have a lot of merit, or do you think it's going to go away?
Again, we don't know what precipitated the event. Nobody here, you, Allison, the lawyer, no one could tell us what happened here. I don't understand what kind of lawsuit this is. How can you evaluate it?
And even if there was some sort of violation, why is it a $5 million payout? Everything doesn't equate to it.
Well, yeah, in the end analysis, the case is only as good as your damages, and that's what a good lawyer looks at. What is a jury going to award in this particular situation?
We'll see. Got to leave it there. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Peter.